I'm so excited. Reverend Doug LeBow has been the music director at NoHo for the last 10 years in North Hollywood. He is a composer, which, did you write that first, the first song?
Be Still and Know is Penelope Williams, and I Am Opening is Jack Fowler.
What about the first one that you guys said? That one you wrote. That's beautiful. He is also an Emmy Award-winning producer. Wow. What a beautiful, yeah, I give him a hand for that. His beautiful wife is here with him, Reverend Sharon Earl. And you have 2 kids. Jesse is 16 and Tyler is 14, and I give you my love. It's a beautiful, yeah, it is a beautiful age, wonderful age. And he's now doing a traveling ministry. Next week he's going to be in Fort Lauderdale. So you're traveling all around the country. I send you love for that. And I am so excited right here and now to introduce to you Reverend Doug LeBow.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Maggie. Appreciate it. Good morning. Oh, all I have to do is what Lane did. It was a good talk. You loved it. Tithe. So happy Mother's Day, and thank you to Dr. Jim for asking me to come and speak today. And I know that Jim and Dorian are going to have a great day in Kauai. They're this morning, right about now, they're getting ready to go to CSL Kauai and visit with Reverend Rita Andriello and Reverend Patrick Farron, who went through ministerial school with Reverend Sharon and I. So good morning. Where's the camera? There. Good morning, Dr. Jim and Dorian. And Dorian and I serve on the Science of Mind Archives Board together. So good friends, good friends. So happy Mother's Day. How many mothers are here today? And how many of you had mothers? Some of you didn't raise your hands. One mom was out walking with her 4-year-old daughter when her daughter picked up something off the ground and put it in her mouth. And the mother said, put that down. And the daughter said, why? She said, because it's been lying outside and you don't know where it's been. It's dirty. It's got germs. And the 4-year-old looked at her mom and she said, how do you know all this stuff? And her mom thought quickly and she said, all moms know this stuff. They have this stuff on the mommy test. You have to pass the mommy test before you can be a mommy. And they kept walking for a couple minutes, and the little girl looked at her mom and said, oh, I get it. If you don't pass the test, then you have to be a daddy. And her mom said, exactly, yeah, right? For me, though, it wouldn't be Mother's Day without, remember Irma Bombeck? So when I was in 11th grade, 1974, she wrote this very famous Irma Bombeck Mother's Day column. It goes like this. By the time the Lord made mothers, he was into his 6th day of creation, working overtime. An angel appeared and said, why are you spending so much time on this one, Lord? And the Lord answered and said, have you seen the spec sheet on this? She has to be completely washable, but not plastic. She has to have 200 movable parts, all replaceable, run on black coffee and leftovers, have a lap that can hold 3 children simultaneously, but disappears once she stands up, have a kiss that can cure anything from a scraped knee to a broken heart, and have 6 pairs of hands. Well, the angel was astounded with the requirements for this one. 6 pairs of hands? No way, said the angel. But the Lord said, it's not the hands that are giving me so much problem. It's all the pairs of eyes. One pair of eyes has to see through a closed door as she asks her children, what are you doing in there, even though she already knows. Another pair in the back of her head needs to see what she needs to know, even though no one thinks she can. And the third pair are right here, and these are the eyes that she looks at a wayward child with and says, I understand and love you, even without ever saying a word. Well, the angel tried to stop the Lord. This is too much work, Lord, too much work for one day. Wait until tomorrow. But I can't, the Lord protested. I'm so close to creating something that's so close to my own perfection. She already heals herself when she's sick, and she can feed a family of 6 with 1 pound of hamburger. And she can even get a 9-year-old to stand in the shower. Well, the angel moved closer and touched the woman and said, you've made her so soft, Lord. And The Lord said, yes, she's soft, but I've also made her tough. You have no idea what she can endure or what she can accomplish. Will she be able to think? Oh, yes, she can think and reason and negotiate. And then the angel noticed something and reached up to the mother's eye and said, oops, it looks like you've got a leak on this model. I think you're trying to put too much in this one. And the Lord said, that's not a leak. That's a tear. What's a tear for? Well, a tear is her way of expressing joy, her sorrow, her disappointment, her pain, her loneliness, her grief, and her pride. And the angel said, you're a genius, Lord. You've thought of everything. You do all things well. Moms are truly amazing. And aren't they? Aren't they amazing? So I am really happy to be here in Simi Valley today, Mother's Day. My mom is buried here in Simi Valley, right up here at Mount Sinai. I have a picture of my mom. There's my mom, Selma. She was a very elegant, beautiful woman. And it's emotional for me because we're going to go visit her right after service. I don't get to Simi Valley that much. We live in Santa Clarita. And so after service today, we're going to head over to see my mom. And my wife, Sharon. Oh, this is my mom's stone. Notice how it says, caregiver to generations, the Mahjong sheriff. She loved Mahjong, you know, and she used to, my parents moved around a lot, and everywhere they went, my mom would teach all of her neighbors how to play Mahjong, and then she'd take all their money. And, you know, when Sharon and I first got together, we've been married 24 years, and when we first got together, thank you. How about that? When we first got together, right after we'd been dating for a month or two, my parents lived in Woodland Hills at the time, and they invited us to come over for a Sunday afternoon for some, you know, barbecuing and swimming and have dinner. And it was a beautiful day. And at the end of the day, like a dutiful future, possibly daughter-in-law, Sharon said, I'll clean up. And I said, great, I'll go with you, and you wash and I'll dry. And my mom had made this beautiful fruit salad that she was kind of famous for, and she had served it in this huge crystal, heavy, thick crystal bowl. And you hear where this is going. And so Sharon was in the kitchen, and she was washing this huge crystal bowl in the sink, and she dropped it, and it shattered. And she looked at me, and then she welled up with tears. And I was standing there, and I was just about to say something when my mom walked into the kitchen. And she took one look at what was going on, and she saw Sharon, and she went right over to Sharon, and she put her arms around her, and she said, honey, it's just a bowl. You're so much more important to me than a bowl. You're so much more important to me than a bowl. And you know what? We are so much more important to God than a bowl. We are the point at which the divine expresses through us and has physical experience on this plane of consciousness. We are the place where God expresses. We're so much more important to God than a bowl. Rumi said, we are born of love. Love is our mother. And Emerson tells us that love is a synonym for God. And Dr. Holmes, hearing that, changed it around and wrote, love is the self-givingness of the spirit through the desire of life to express itself in terms of creation. And isn't that what the act of becoming a mother is about? Expressing yourself in terms of creation, reproducing. I had a great relationship with my mom, too. And in fact, it's really funny. John Newbill is a practitioner today. He's a very good friend of ours. John spent quite a bit of time coming to the NoHo Arts Center on Sunday mornings, and he went through his practitioner training, and he did his very first treatments in front of the congregation while he was still at the NoHo Arts. The very first time I was a licensed practitioner on a Sunday morning, I was giving my treatment from the pulpit, and, you know, invited everyone to all join together in knowing this truth, and I'm right in the middle of this treatment, and a cell phone goes off, loud. And I kind of opened up one eye. Of course, it was my mother. She's reaching for her bag and she looks up at me, she's kind of like, sorry. You know, and right in the middle of the treatment, I said, and that's my mother. And everybody busted out laughing. But it was a great moment. It was a great treatment. That was my very first treatment. When I was 25 years old, I got myself in a little bit of financial trouble. I was working as a sign language interpreter in those days, living in the San Fernando Valley, and I just really had missed that lesson about money management somewhere along the way, and I got myself in a little bit of trouble, and I had like, late notices coming every month, and some like your account is closed notices, and I went to my mom, and I was ashamed of myself. I went to my mom and I said, I need some help. I wasn't asking for a loan. I was really looking for some help because I just didn't know what to do. I was really confused about the science of paying your bills on time. The money comes in, you get the bills, you don't do that other thing, you pay the bills. And my mom, she took my finances away from me. She took them over and she said, I'm going to put you on a budget. I'm going to teach you how to do this. She put me on a budget. I was 25 and I lived on bologna sandwiches for about 18 months. And what I didn't know was that she actually paid off my bills, and the whole time I thought I was paying off my creditors, I was actually paying off my mom and my dad. And 18 months, I would go and sit with my mom every single month with my bills and my pay stubs and everything, and just get myself back kind of in the habit of doing that. And when the 18 months were over and she handed me back my finances, I had $5,000 in my savings account and didn't owe anybody any money, which for me was like a miracle. It was a miracle, but it was not a miracle. It was my mom. And so she said to me, you've done a good job. You've learned a good lesson. Go on a vacation. Where would you like to go? I said, I think I'd like to go to Club Med in Cancun, Mexico. And she handed me my American Express card and said, go and have a good time, and when the bill comes, pay it from your savings. And she handed me back my finances. And literally from that day until this day, I've never had a late bill, a late notice. And she taught me how to be an adult in that respect. And Emerson wrote, all men are what their mothers made of them. So my mom, Selma, was unconditional love. She raised me and my sister, and after we were already grown, my mom's younger brother, Steve, was a widower with 2 young kids, David, who was 10, and Daniel, who was 8. He died of an unexpected heart attack, and my mom and dad then raised my cousins, David and Daniel, and then, can you go back to my mom's marker? Can you go back to that one? See, we're up here, caregiver to generations. That is not just a word. First she raised Amy and I, and then she raised David and to me and to my sister, she was Mom, and to all of our friends, she was Mrs. LeBow. But when she raised David and Daniel, my parents were then living mostly in Atlanta at that time. To David and Daniel, she was Auntie Selma. And to all of their friends, a lot of friends, she was Auntie Selma, all through elementary school, through high school, through college. David went to Emory, Daniel went to Tech, Georgia Tech. She was welcome in both of their fraternities, Auntie Selma. And then my sister Amy, who lives out here in West Hills, she had a special needs child who needed nursing constantly. My nephew Jonathan, who has a rare skin disease, very, very fragile skin, and he needed a nurse with him all the time because if he had an accident, he needed somebody to sew him up. Well, my mom had been a registered nurse for 40 years, so she kind of came out of retirement and became my nephew's full-time nurse and went to school with him every day through elementary school and junior high school, and she became the classroom to everybody at his schools. She was Nana. She was Nana to the kids, she was Nana to the teachers, she was Nana to the staff, and she wasn't the kind of person who would just sit with nothing to do waiting for Jonathan to have a cut and need to be stitched up. So she graded papers, she cleaned classrooms, she became Nana to everybody. The self-givingness of spirit through the desire of life to express itself in terms of creation. And, before I found religious science, I was brought up Jewish. In fact, I was a Jewish cantor in my 20s. And to Jews, creation means Genesis, like traditional thought, Genesis. And in Genesis, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion, that's a great word, over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over everything that creepeth on the earth. Dominion means control. But we, New Thought thinkers, we know that the only thing that we have dominion over is our experience, ourselves, our experience. What goes in comes out. right? We have dominion over our manifestation. God has given us God, ourselves as God, individualizing a divine idea, a divine wisdom, a divine creative expression. We say there's one life, that life is God, and that life is my life. There's one mind, that mind is God, and that mind is my mind. We call that principle, the principle that God is all there is and that we live in a cause and effect universe. Dr. David Walker was the founder of the Los Angeles Church of Religious Science, where Sharon and I spent many years before we co-founded the NoHo Art Center in North Hollywood. And Dr. David used to say, we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by our use of a spiritual law, cause and effect. Now, what he's saying, we're spiritual beings, all of us, living in a spiritual universe, and our experience here, we don't govern the universe, but our experience here is governed by our use of a spiritual law. And that spiritual law is cause and effect. So what we think, what we believe, has an effect on what we experience in the day-to-day. And you guys all know this, I know. We call that mind over manifestation. Mind over manifestation. Mom. Mind. I'm tying it back to Mother's Day. And just like a good mom, you know, God loves us no matter what. They say that a mother's love will go with her children whether they go to the governor's chair or the electric chair. That is unconditional love. And, you know, being brought up Jewish, I never really had the opportunity to experience a lot of the New Testament teachings, like the parables of the master teacher, until I started studying for ministry. But one story that I love is the story of the prodigal son. Anybody know what the word prodigal means? We only hear that word when we're talking about the story of the prodigal son. You never go like, I went to the prodigal restaurant today. That was a prodigal experience. No, prodigal, it means wasteful. And the only time we ever hear the word prodigal, it means wasteful in terms of the story. So here's a synopsis of the story. Quick synopsis. There was a man, he had 2 sons. The younger son told his father that he wanted his part of the inheritance right now while you're still living. Good son, huh? But interestingly enough, the father gave it to him. So the father divided what he had. He gave part to the younger son. A couple days later, the younger son ups and packs off and goes to a faraway country, and while he's there, he wastes everything that his father gave him extravagantly. After he spends all of his money, and there's a severe famine, he now has no money, no food, and no way to support himself. So he gets a brilliant idea. Remember when I said I got in trouble and I asked my mom for help? This guy has a brilliant idea. He says he decided he'd go home to his father and he'd tell his father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Please make me one of your servants, because he knew even his father's servants were eating better than he was eating right now. So he made the journey back to his father, and when his father saw him, he ran up to his father, and his father hugged him and kissed him, and he started to tell his father exactly what he planned to say. Father, I've sinned against you. I'm not even worthy to be called your son. But his father stopped him and said, my son was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, and now he's found. Let's have a party. Now, the older brother is still working in the fields, and he hears this music coming from the house, and he asks one of the servants what's going on, and he's told that his brother has returned home, and his father was having a celebration. Well, the older brother, he was kind of angry. He didn't like that at all. His father had never had a celebration for him. But as soon as my brother comes back, he who wasted all of his money, now you're having a big party. And his father said, don't worry, son. Everything that I have will still be yours, but we have a right to be happy. Your brother was dead, and now he's alive, and he's come home to us. Now, this is a story about God's unconditional love and sin, this the S word, and redemption. Now, the parable teaches us that when we sin, what we're doing is we're turning away from God. Now, we New Thought thinkers, how many New Thought thinkers here? We don't really use the word sin very much. Traditional religions will say, you know, you're punished for your sins. If we understand how the creative universe works, we don't say that. We know that we're punished by our sins. When we sin, we experience it right here in our body, right? We experience it. We understand that sin is like from the sport archery. Sin in archery simply means missing the mark. When you sin, you have not hit the bullseye. We think it's not thinking the highest thoughts. That's sin. You know, We live in a much safer world now than we did 30, 40, 50 years ago, where there was always the Cold War and the threat of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Remember the ICBMs, you know? President Reagan kind of diffused all that with the Russians. Now, what's going on in the Ukraine? You know, we actually have a very vibrant New Thought community, Temenos, in the Ukraine. Reverend Barbara Leisure, and she's doing great work in the Ukraine. And it's kind of scary to be in the Ukraine right now. And you know that there's a lot of political unrest there. There's been a lot of thought lately about the Cold War and the idea of armaments and missiles. You know, it seems there are as many people committed to war as there are committed to peace. I think it's very important that those of us who know that our thoughts and our beliefs are very important for us to concentrate on peace as much as possible every day. But go back several generations to when we used to have bomb shelters and people were afraid of missiles. Do you ever think about how those missiles get to where they're going? Intercontinental ballistic missiles are all guided by a gyroscope and by, there wasn't any GPS at the time. It just kind of, it was always off target until it hit the target. Think about that. The missile would take off from wherever it was going and look at its destination, go, oh, I'm a little bit to the right. Oh, I got to correct. I'm a little bit to the left. Oh, I'm a little bit to the right. I'm a little bit to the left. Notice that it never went, oh, I'm a little bit to the right. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Oh, I'm a little bit to the left. Bad, bad, bad. No, it just knew that it was off target, right? And it corrected until it hit the target. Well, to us in the New Thought movement, that's what sin is, just being off target. Off target in archery, off target in our life in the New Thought way that we think, off target. It means that we're not thinking the highest thoughts about ourselves, and we know when we don't take the opportunity to think the highest thoughts, our experience reacts to that. Mind over manifestation. We have dominion over our experiences. Going back to the prodigal son for a second, you know, we are all both of the sons in that story. Because like the younger son who asked for his inheritance and then goes off and squanders it and turned away from God. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I find myself turning away from the highest thought of myself sometimes, many times during a day, and have to remind myself. You know, I carry Science of Mind magazine. I carry Creative Thought magazine so that when I notice, and this is the trick, right? When I notice I'm thinking something not kind about myself, I can always pull out one of those magazines and read something that reminds me that my kindness to myself is a gift I can give myself, and it's my mind over my manifestation. I want to stop that manifestation before it actually happens. Like the older brother in the story, though, I think we're all like that too. He is afraid that his brother will take all of his inheritance. You know, I think a lot of times when we see people who have done very well, maybe have good consciousness or maybe just come from money or whatever, we worry that maybe there's not going to be enough for us. So we're kind of like both of the sons in the story. Our job, I think, is to simply remember that God is all there is and that we live in an unlimited, generous universe and keep turning our conscious thoughts back to that truth. And that's what we do when we treat, right? When we use affirmative prayer, we methodically remind ourselves of the ever-presence of God. The father in the prodigal son story represents divine love, the self-givingness of the Spirit. No matter what you do, God will still love you. God will always express its love through you, meaning that the mechanical nature of the universe, the cause and effect universe, will always serve you. You have dominion over it. And a loving mom will always love you too. But that doesn't necessarily mean your mom's going to agree with everything that you say and do, right? Sometimes your mom might say, you know better than that. If your mom catches you doing something that she doesn't think is to your highest good, she might say, you know better than that. Last Sunday, Sharon and I were at Reverend John McLean's Center for Spiritual Living, Los Angeles, and he said, and I love this, he said, if you know better, but you're not doing better, then you have to ask yourself, what are you doing? Right? If you know better, and if you're sitting in this room, I think you do. If you know better, but you're not doing better, what are you doing? The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "People have a hard time letting go of their suffering out of a fear of the unknown. They'd prefer to suffer with the familiar." So because we're afraid that we'll experience something even worse, we don't want to change our thinking because of the opportunity for it to get worse, rather than thinking that changing our thinking might make things better. People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. Thich Nhat Hanh. Watching what comes into our mind and what comes out of our mouth, that's our life's work. And I think to many of us who didn't grow up in this teaching, the study of metaphysics can be difficult. It's adult work too. Because if we're not taught this principle of oneness as children, it can take some pretty serious unlearning from other kind of orthodox spiritual teaching to replace those limiting ideas with new thoughts. But that's what we're here for, new thoughts. And in the same way that your physical body keeps score of every calorie that you eat and every minute that you spend exercising and balances them out, your spiritual body, your manifestation, also keeps score of everything that you think and everything that you put into mind, and it shows up in the same way on your body. And you know, anybody here ever gone on a diet? And ever? You know that when you start eating right and exercising and you start to feel better and then you see the results, well, it's the same. When you start thinking better thoughts about yourself, believing truth about yourself and the universe you live in, and you start to have results, you feel better about yourself. We say, change your thinking and you'll change your life. Well, if you like your life and what you're experiencing right now, no change is necessary. But if you want to experience something different than what you're experiencing right now, the answer is simple. Change your thinking and you will change your life. Is it easy? Not necessarily. It can be, but it's not always. But we can do it. It's like the old joke. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 right. So how do you practice? You take classes, you treat, you see a practitioner, you meditate. You know, Dr. Jim has a book called Sacred Thinking. Every time I've taught Science of Mind, I've used Dr. Jim's book, Sacred Thinking, because he's got a great chapter in it on meditation. It's only about 4 pages long, but he very clearly and easily explains how to meditate in a very non-woo-woo way. I know a lot of people think, I can't meditate, I'll just fall asleep. He explains very simply how to use breathing, a breathing technique to quiet your mind and go to that place. I've used it with every one of my Science of Mind classes, and I think it's brilliant. So if you haven't read it, I'm sure it's in the bookstore, Dr. Jim's book, Sacred Thinking. Your mind over your manifestation. That's what we're talking about, your mind. Dr. Holmes teaches that the universe can only do for us what it can do through us. Spirit can only give us what we're willing to take. We need to be receptive to this power. This is the last thing I want to talk to you about today, receptivity. So on this Mother's Day, let me leave you with an acronym for mother, M-O-T-H-E-R. More opportunities to have excellent receptivity to God's power expressing through you. More opportunities to have excellent receptivity to God's power expressing through you. Let the universe's good express through you. That's what it wants, your highest good. So thanks for letting me visit today, and happy Mother's Day.